All right, so today we're learning sine and cosine. Yesterday we learned tangent. Today we're learning the last two trig ratios, sine and cosine. The basis, guys, the foundation for being able to solve these is knowing your acronym, SOHCAHTOA. Now, the first three letters in the acronym, SO, S stands for what? Sine. O stands for opposite, and H stands for hypotenuse. You should have this written down from yesterday. Don't necessarily have to copy it down again, although it's helpful in memorizing this. The next three letters in the acronym are CAH, C-A-H, where C stands for what? Cosine. A stands for adjacent, and H stands for hypotenuse. And remember, these are side lengths as compared to angles. So I start with an angle and I figure out which sides I know. And then TOA is the one that we learned yesterday. T stands for tangent, O for opposite, and A for adjacent. These are our templates for setting up our trig ratios and plugging in our values. All right, so now let's look at how this is going to look in an example. All right, so in example 1, it says to find the sine and cosine ratios. So in example 1, I'm specifically finding the ratios given in your homework. It's going to say, find the ratios of the acute angles. The acute angles? Well, how do I know which one's acute? I mean, it's less than 90, and I can clearly see that obviously K is 90, so that doesn't count. So it's going to be for J and for L. Let's start with angle L. If I'm trying to find the sine of angle L, what was the ratio again for sine? Opposite over hypotenuse. So if I'm starting with angle L over here, which side length is opposite? Would it be 17, 8, or 15? 8. It's 8. Okay, so I plug in an 8. Which side length is the hypotenuse? 17, because remember, the hypotenuse is always opposite from the right angle. So 17, 8 over 17. Can I reduce it? So I'm done. All right. What about the cosine for L? What is the ratio again for cosine?
Adjacent over hypotenuse.
Yeah, so guys, this is why that acronym is so important, because if I can picture the acronym, I can always keep it straight, which one's which, okay, and what goes over what. So which side length, 8, 17, or 15, is adjacent to L? 15. Which one's hypotenuse?
17.
Can I reduce it? No. So box it in. What is the other acute angle? What was the other acute angle? J. So now find the sine and cosine for angle J. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So which value is opposite angle J? 15. Which one is hypotenuse?
17.
Okay, so 15 over 17. What about cosine? 8 over... Who got them right? Okay, so now let's pull it into what we learned yesterday. I want you to find the tangent of angle L and the tangent of angle J. So now basically we're just finding all three, sine, cosine, and tangent for each acute angle. And that'll be how it's structured on your quiz also. It'll say find the sine, cosine, and tangent of the angle. Okay, so what would be tangent L?
8 over 15.
Okay, opposite over adjacent, so 8 over 15. What about tangent J? 15 over 8. Okay, very good. So that's how I find the ratios using sine, cosine, and tangent. Now in example 2, these are the fun ones. We're going to use a calculator. So yesterday we learned where the tangent button was. Remember, we learned where tangent button was? Guess what? Sine and cosine are right next to them. You literally find it the exact same way, except you hit a different button. If it says to find sine, you hit the sine button and enter 38. Sine of 38, end the parentheses and hit equals, and you round to 4 decimal places. The rounding is important. If you do it wrong, you get no credit. So for sine of 38, we get, say it with me, 0.61566. That fifth number, if it is a 5 or above, what happens to the fourth digit? It rounds up. So the fifth digit is very important. It tells me what to round the fourth digit to. You do not have to write. The this part because it's technically done in your calculator. This part right here, you don't have to write that in your work for your homework. All you have to do is the 4-digit answer. But I just wanted to show you how you round appropriately. Okay, so now I want you to find the cosine, sine, and tangent of those 3 values. So go ahead and finish the rest of the slide. So what's cosine of 43?
0.7314.
Eric, what's your question? Oh, okay, for baseball? Okay. All right, finish this video on YouTube, okay? And this conversation's on the video too, so give you some laughs. All right, what about sine of 79? Sine of 79?
0.9816.
9816. What about tangent 42?
0.914.
You want me to put a bunch of these on your quiz?
Yeah.
Yeah, these are easy. You just have to round correctly. All right, now in example 3, okay, I'm going to start using these ratios to find unknown side lengths. So let's pretend that in the example it doesn't tell me which one is which, because on your homework it doesn't. If I'm only looking at the triangle, focus on the triangle, okay? If I'm only looking at this triangle, how could I figure out if it's sine or cosine? How do I know? This is how I know. I look specifically at what angle measure I know. Here it is. It's only going to give you one of the acute angle measures. So if I know 41, that's my basis. So if I'm looking at 41, what side lengths do I know? I know, which one is this? How does it relate to 41? Is it opposite, adjacent, or hypotenuse? X. It's adjacent. And what about 16 as it relates to 41? Hypotenuse. So which trig ratio deals with adjacent and hypotenuse? Cosine. So that's how you know. Now, obviously, example 3 told us, but if it doesn't, which it doesn't in your homework, that's how you figure it out. Start with the angle you know, and then how do the side lengths relate? Is it opposite, adjacent, or hypotenuse? So now that I know that, it's going to be cosine of D equals adjacent over hypotenuse. You don't actually have to write this part, adjacent over hypotenuse, but for me, visually, I like to see that. And then, did I have a value for cosine of D? Did I have a value?
Yes.
41. You really could just start there and just say cosine of 41 equals, what is the adjacent value to 41? X. What's the hypotenuse? 16. Now, if you remember from yesterday, we can simplify this, can't we? Right? Enter cosine 41. And you go out 4 decimals. Leave that number there, okay? We can write it. Equals x over 16. And now how do I solve for x? How do I solve for x? Multiply both sides by 16, and you always round your answer to the nearest tenth. Always round your answer to the nearest tenth. Very, very rarely, I would say, if ever, these answers will come out to be even numbers. I mean, it would just be crazy, just because of how we're solving. All right, so that's how I find an unknown side length. You think you could do one? Yeah, you can do one. All right, we're just going to change up the numbers a little bit. All right, raise your hand when you're done. I want to come check. All right. Okay, so cosine of D, again, is adjacent over hypotenuse, cosine of 38. I multiply both sides by 22, and I get approximately 17.3. So guys, example 4 is the exact same thing, except now I'm using a different ratio. Now I'm using sine in example 4, using my sine ratio. It says to find the height above ground level. It was basically a word problem from our book. But again, I just want you to only focus on the triangle. So if I'm only focusing on the triangle, how do I know if it's going to be sine or cosine? I know that by looking at the angle measure, okay? And so I start there and I say, all right, compared to 27, which sides do I know? Which side values are these? They're opposite and hypotenuse. So which trig ratio gives me opposite and hypotenuse? Sine. So that's how I know to use sine, given that my example doesn't tell me, which it's not going to on your homework or your quiz. So sine of 27 equals opposite over hypotenuse. Go ahead and simplify sine of 27 and then solve for x. Okay, so sine of 27, I get my decimal. What do I have to do to both sides? Multiply by 164. Okay, and then what did you get for your answer?
74.
Yeah, now the only reason I put feet, normally you don't, is just because in the question it was like more or less a word problem. You have 2 word problems on your homework, so just make sure you label on those specifically. All right, and that's everything you need to know, guys. We are done with chapter 9. That's it. Yep.